Hello and welcome back to this channel. This is a new installment of Gimme 10. And typically in Gimme 10 I spotlight 10 records from a certain genre or subgenre. But this week I've decided to dedicate this installment to an instrument, which is the oud. I find the oud fascinating and beguiling as an instrument. I find it sound moody, melancholy, and atmospheric. And I think it's worth spotlighting 10 records from my Middle Eastern section, which I've got a couple of cubes there. Nothing to really brag about. Just a few nice examples, and within that I pulled out some interesting records featuring largely the oud as the main instrument. The oud is a pear-shaped stringed instrument which typically has 10 to 13 strings, and emerged in about the 10th or 11th century in Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq and Iran. Largely used for devotional purposes, very much linked to Islam, but not just. Obviously, we're going to see records here that don't fit that, don't go in that box, obviously, and which continues to be used to this day. Fortunately, we've got some really great players who still, push the instrument forwards. Sorry. Okay, the first record I want to spotlight here is this fantastic release by Salman Shukur, and it's just simply titled Oud, which is a great way to start this Gimme 10, really. Salman Shukur only made this one record, and he was the head of the music department and professor of oud at the Baghdad Institute of Fine Arts. So he was a music professor, and they recorded this when he came to Durham in England. There was the Durham Festival of Oriental Music in August '76. So he came and premiered these two. This is basically two compositions, a side-long composition on each side, and both of them reflect kind of very religious or literary kind of influences of Salman Shukur at the time. And the first one is an extended tone poem, and the second side is basically a folk song in 3 movements. Very beautiful, meditative, again moody, atmospheric piece, just solo oud. This is just a gorgeous record, and it sort of starts very slow, and you wonder, is something really going to happen here? And as it picks up, it's a classical composition, really. So I highly recommend this. Don't think it's too hard to find. It's just that nobody wants these kinds of records. The next record is another record from Iraq. This time is this amazing singer-songwriter, I would call this, debut album by Farzi Alidi. As I said, hails from Basra in Iraq, and was a refugee to France. Now, what's interesting about this? It was put out on Le Chant du Monde. Chant du Monde is a French label which basically represented the world's struggles, primarily to do with, in the 1960s and beyond. They sort of embraced every sort of struggle, from communist, socialist struggles to people displaced by war, and released a lot of protest records. And I might even do a spotlight on Chant du Monde eventually. But they always made beautiful records. Like look at this trifold thing, which they really had the greatest care, and the liner notes are amazing. So this guy was a refugee to France, and he released I've got two of his records. I've got also Baghdad, which is his second album, which is also really, really good. But I've decided to spotlight this one today. Silence, or Silence, as it probably was in as it was released in France. Um, this album is, again, as I said, a singer-songwriter album. Very traditional style, again, very sort of uplifting, moody, but also kind of somber at times. Obviously, I don't understand the lyrics there. It's very difficult to pinpoint what he says exactly. But what's interesting is the titles have been translated into French, and the titles, if I go by the titles, it fits that kind of atmosphere. It's very sort of, not depressed, but I mean, you can imagine somebody who's fleeing the countries because of war. You can imagine the content of that. The next one is a bit more uplifting. Is a belly dance record, Nadira by Yousef Kassab. Now, Yousef Kassab is obviously an oud player, but he also composes this belly dancing record, and this is very jaunty and joyous, and obviously it's party music basically. This guy was from Aleppo in Syria, so Syrian composer, and this is highly dynamic, highly rhythmic. It's just a beautiful record. And obviously the oud plays a big part in this, as being this kind of like driving kind of lead that you can hear throughout the record. Nadira by Yousef Kassab, beautiful record. The next record is from Egypt / Sudan. This guy was born, technically born in Egypt, but the music is Nubian folk music, which is Egypt, Sudan, kind of that region, what they call the Horn of Africa. This is Escalade, the Water Wheel, by Hamza Eldin, and it's just voice and oud, like the Farzi Alidi record. Again, this kind of very melancholy and very stark kind of music. You feel the peasant life, you feel the struggle, you feel the desire for being alive. The Water Wheel. This came out on Non-Such Explorer series, great ethnographic kind of collection. Now, this guy released lots and lots of different records, and they're all worth investigating. I've got 2 or 3 of them, and I think this one being my favorite one of the lot. And I'm going to segue directly to the next record, which is an American record. Sandy Bull with A Pluribus Unum is like 4th or 5th record. That's from 1965. Now, interestingly enough, Sandy Bull learned the oud from Hamza Eldin. So he studied with him, and this record is, however, very different in style. It's a psychedelic record. Obviously, you've got 2 side-long tracks, No Deposits, No Return Blues, which is 17 minutes long, and then you've got Electric Blend, which is nearly 22 minutes long. And they're made of like bits of guitar, electric guitar, ouds, Indian bass drum, cowbell, and they're kind of like psychedelic symphonies, really. And I don't know, this may be my favorite Sandy Bull record, although, I mean, the first 2 records you can't get past, really, but this is a fantastic album. Again, it takes a bit of time to unravel, it is really like a symphony, but a psychedelic oud symphony. Sandy Bull was obviously one of the leading figures of American primitivism, which is really, the sort of blend between bluegrass and classical music and folk music. It deserves a Gimme 10 as well. Next record is in the same vein as the Sandy Bull. It's this beautiful fifth, I think, LP by the John Berberian. John Berberian, and in here in the Rock East Ensemble, which I think was an attempt from the record companies to cash in on a kind of exploiter, kind of East meets West sound. Ragnarok was the flavor of the times, and so they probably thought, this would be kind of an interesting thing to put out. Is John Berberian. John Berberian was an American, of obviously, as his name indicates, of Armenian descent. Very proficient oud player. In fact, very clever guy. Completed an MBA in Harvard University, and this is a mixture between psychedelic rock. Obviously, it's very psychedelic in nature. Psychedelic rock, Arabic folk music, Armenian folk music, Turkish folk music is all mixed in there. And the opening track will give you a flavor of this, the oud and the fuzz. This is a seriously great record, which I think you should be able to find reasonably easily. It was reissued. My copy is a reissue from 2021. But nonetheless, I think if you like that kind of ragga rock, it's a bit like the Grateful Dead. If Jerry Garcia played the oud instead of the guitar, not really, but just try to give you a ballpark. And I'll continue with yet another kind of exploiter record, and this one is from France, the Orient Express. Came out on Mainstream, 1968, I want to say, and this is a trio, as you can see, fronted by a French guy called Guy Duris, who hails from Paris, and he's the main man and plays the electric oud, the electric sitar, and sings. And then he met two other guys, Farshid Goleshorki, who hailed from Iran, who plays the electric melodica, which on this record stands out. Like, it's amazing. If you want to hear a beautiful melodica that's not Augustus Pablo, listen to this record. Dumbek, timpani and vocals, and then they were joined by Bruno Gillet, a Belgian native, who played the electric minitar and also sang. So this is a mixture between it's a ragga rock record. It's influenced by Arabic folk music for sure. Very sort of distinct Persian influences, but all in all is a fantastic kind of like 60s psych record, but with a very strong Arabic kind of flavor. All right, going back to more traditional ouds, but this time kind of with jazzy influences. And I have to talk about Rabi Abu Khalil. Rabi Abu Khalil is from Lebanon, I believe. And this is his second record, Between Dusk and Dawn, and it may just be his best record. But this is definitely like a sort of ECM style jazz record. It's got Charlie Mariano on sax, it's got Glenn Moore on bass, so the band is largely kind of Westerners, if you will. And you've got some also South Indian percussion there by Ramesh Chotam. So it's a mix between, yes, Arabic and European jazz and Indian kind of influences. And the sound of the sax on this, which is Charlie Mariano, is very mournful, very sort of high pitched sax. You know, you're not talking about like Coltrane type sax, which is kind of a bit warmer. This is very sort of like icy. It's between dusk and dawn. It's a very, very, very lovely record, which I highly, highly recommend. Any Rabbi Abu Khalil, he's a master oud player. He's this came out in 1987. Continuing in the same kind of vein, very jazzy as well. And I have to talk about Anwar Abrahim, who was also a master of the oud and comes from Tunisia. Here's the master. This not only has a very ECM-like sound, but it actually did come out on ECM. ECM 1432. Was recorded in Oslo in 1990, and is a trio, and it's a very lovely, meditative, devotional kind of meeting between the oud, the violin, and percussion. It's very deep and just gets you into a sort of a trance if you just, if you concentrate on it. It's very transcendental, as a record, and it's called Bazak. But almost every ECM Anwar Abraham is worth picking up. I reckon they're all good. All right, I'm going to cheat a bit, and the next record is a record from Lebanon, but it's not the oud. It's a record on bouzuk. Because I thought, where do I fit this record? And this is a record that I really very rarely talk about, if ever. And it's a record that I know very little about, because there is very little information about Azar Habib, even on the internet. He was a Lebanese musician. He's obviously very highly regarded. This is an instrumental record where, again, it's very mournful, very melancholy, kind of traditional take on Lebanese songs. And this came out in 1975 on a label which I adore, which is the La Voix de l'Orient, EMI, subsidiary of EMI. I think because I don't know very much about this, it's very hard for me to talk about it. I think I'd say just go on YouTube and see if you can get clips of this. But he's obviously very, very skilled, and it's a lovely, lovely record. Azar Habib. And I'm going to cheat again with a modern record, one that came out 2 years ago, maybe. And this time it's not an oud or a bouzuk, it's a tambour. This is a very young man, Mohammed Mustafa Edarian is his name, and he's a Kurdish tambour player, and he hails from Iran, and his father is a traditional tambour maker, so he was just sort of born into it. These songs were recorded in 2019, so this guy is barely like 20 years old or something. I picked this up based really on the cover more than anything. It was in a local record shop. Yeah, I bought it probably a couple of years ago, and I was really surprised when I put it on the turntable, because it's a lovely mix between percussion and tambour. You can see great ease with improvisation and scales. This guy is obviously an absolute master of and he's barely 20. And I'm going to finish with a pair of modern oud records. Now I have to talk about Dafe Yousef. I've got two of his albums. This is Divine Shadows, and this is Electric Sufi. This guy's from Tunisia, and he mixes jazz, electronics, and traditional music. This record is more of a trip-hop kind of feel to it. They both came out in. This is from 2001 and this is from 2006, so it's more recent. But I highly recommend listening to Dafe Yousef. He's from the next generation, obviously, like the guy I was just talking about, and these records are worth having a listen to. Okay, I want to stop talking now, and I hope you enjoy this installment. Maybe it inspires you to pick up some of that Middle Eastern music. Take care.